The first step in the installation process begins with cutting a 40 centimetre deep vertical hole into the turf. We use a hollow tube which is hammered into the ground using a hammer and a piece of wood. That tube is then extracted from the soil and the sand or soil is shaken from the probe, and you continue this process until you get down to 40 centimetres. The next step is to insert the probe into the hole that you've dug, making sure that the top of the probe is exactly at the soil level, and also that the soil surrounding the probe is quite tight around the actual probe itself. So normally it takes a couple of goes just to get that height right, and then make sure the soil and turf is firm around the probe. The next step is to prepare the site for the logger housing, and usually we're looking at about 20 to 30 centimetres away from the probe, and the best way is to have a sharp knife and cut around the base of the logger housing. Then the plug of turf can be pulled out, and then it's just a matter of using any sort of implement to dig the soil out at the base of the plug, just to create a hole where the logger housing will fit so that it's sitting at ground level. And you'll note on the logger housing that there's a hole near the top, and this is the hole where the cable will come into the logger housing, so it's important that that's on the same side as where the cable is. Now the probe, the logger housing is inserted at ground level, and the next step is to cut a trench from the logger across to the probe. And again, the best way for doing this is using a knife, just to cut or slice through the top of the turf, and then get a spade and lever the turf so you create an opening where you can put the cable from the probe in below the surface of the turf and in through the hole in the logger housing. Once that's in place, everything can be firmed up, making sure again that the logger housing is at ground level, the probe is tight, and the turf is put back in position around the cable. The next step is to get the logger, and you'll see that the logger has got a connector which can easily be connected to the cable coming from the probe. It's important that they snap together, then the locking nut is rotated so that it becomes waterproof, and that's very important that that's done properly. And this shows how the probe or the logger sits in the logger housing. The next step in the installation process is to use a magnet. By holding the magnet up against the logger, you can activate the logger so that it will communicate with the website. Once that has been done, the logger's put back in position and the PVC cap is put in position on top of the logger housing and firmed into position, and that completes the installation process.